You are watching The Horizon, the voice of the Amba woman, exclusively on ABC Amba TV.
It's another year and another Independence Day for a people at war. Once again, the time has come for Ambazonians across the globe to unite and celebrate their independence on October 1st. A day of pride, hope, and renewed purpose is upon us.
As we mark this significant occasion with cultural representations, dances, military parades from the Ambazonian State Army, all eyes will turn to the leader of the revolution.
Fellow Ambazonians, patriotic diasporas, I salute all of you gathered around our flag on this national day, our Independence Day.
President Samuel Ikome Sako, on the eve of Independence Day. Join us on September 30th at 8 p.m. as President Samuel Ikome Sako addresses the nation.
Today, as the Never Again generation, we have one assignment: to right this great wrong through the sword of justice, with the flame of our courage and the undying spirit of our righteous resolve. So whether we live or die, let it be for Ambazonia.
In these trying times, amidst an 8-year conflict with La République du Cameroon, President Sako's words are expected to spark hope and chart a new direction.
Let me tell you again in a simple language. The person who does not want his neighbor to sleep should expect a knock on his door.
While the date for the war to end remains uncertain, brace yourselves for a roadmap towards a smarter prosecution of our liberation movement, a vision full of promise and determined leadership. Prepare to be inspired as we honor our journey and look forward to a brighter future.
To remind the world of our genocide and the injustice done to us as a nation by France and the complicit international community. Share our story with passion and courage, knowing that no one feels our pain more than we do, and no one knows our story more than those who have lived it, us. Let us fight as one man.
Tune in live across all multimedia platforms and catch this monumental speech only on your favorite TV channel. Don't miss this pivotal moment. Together, let's reignite the spirit of Ambazonia.
This Independence Day, immerse yourself in the words of our leader. Be part of history in the making. Stand with Ambazonia. Empower ABC Amba TV. We are calling on Ambazonians around the world to unite and uplift ABC Amba TV, Ambazonian Broadcasting Corporation. In this critical time of war, ensuring the station's survival is more important than ever. But what does ABC Amba TV truly represent for Ambazonia?
At the heart of Ambazonia's war of independence, ABC Amba TV stands as a beacon. Years of recolonization, annexation, and French Cameroon's oppressive occupation of the southern Cameroon's Ambazonia have led to our exclusion. Our identity was hidden, our history distorted, our sovereignty denied. Queen of England is aware that the British Southern Cameroons were never a colony under France.
Since its inception in 2018, ABC Amba TV has been our lifeline.
Months of diplomacy have failed to resolve the crisis as fear grows over an imminent Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Our work in the dark is our chance to tell our stories to the world, to give voice to the voiceless and broadcast the truth of our struggle.
We are serious about executing this revolution.
It has become a vital arm of our government in wartime, making diplomacy achievable and showcasing our untold stories.
ABC Amba, you guys know how important ABC is for this, our quest for international recognition.
Your donations can make a world of difference. Every bit of support helps keep our stories alive, our presence known, and our fight in the global conversation.
The moment they notice that we are no longer on air, they think that, oh, maybe La Republic has succeeded. This is about Ambazonia. One thing we must always remember.
Where would we be without ABC Amba TV? Let's ensure we never have to find out.
A revolution is a temporary state of insanity to bring about sanity.
Mobilize, donate, stand with Ambazonia. Donate to ABC Amba TV.
Together, let's write the next chapter of our history.
It is better to light the candle than to curse the dark.
Support ABC Amba TV campaign. Ambazonia Independence, voice for the voiceless. Mobilize for change.
Hello. Good evening, fellow Ambazonians, particularly those at home front. Greetings to all Ambazonian sympathizers and patrons across the world who have joined us to watch the Horizon this evening. Welcome to the Horizon once again, the voice of the Ambazonian woman. Today I will be joined by Dr. Lobati once again, and we are going to be talking about the very important Independence Day. Ambazonia Independence Day on the 1st of October. We celebrate this every next week. Tuesday is our Independence Day. And Ambazonia this day, the significance, their importance, and why we must continue to celebrate our Independence Day or to commemorate our Independence Day. And also we'll be talking about the UN General Assembly 2024, the significance of La Republique Representative UN 2024, and some statements that were made. I would have this discussion today. And Dr. Lobati.
Nations.
Thank you much. I did not hear you earlier there. I just able to see you on screen. Hope you can hear me very well, Doctor.
Correct. I can hear you, and I was saying we're very grateful to be together again. Thank you, and I hope you have rested well and your energy will be renewed. We would like to explore this topic about our independence and issues surrounding it, most especially because one of us, Philimon is the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations. And what does that mean concerning our situation? It's important for our people to truly understand what significance does it have that Philimon is the President of the General Assembly of UN concerning our independence. We'll try to explore that and explain things to our people.
Thank you. Diving straight into the conversation. We have this is the last weekend before our Independence Day. But before we dive into more of that, it's very important we start from the most recent events, which is Philimon representing La Republique as the president, because we know the UN General Assembly is for presidents of nations. But for La Republique, they had Philimon. Like you mentioned, the significance, why is it that is Philimon representing La Republique at the United Nations this year, and the implication and the significance for our freedom quest. I'd like to go get straight into the details of this. Let's learn and understand the strategies La Republique is using to deceive the international community or the powers that be. Thank you.
Correct. So well, we need to be able to understand exactly what the institution called the United Nations is, and who truly controls it, and their actions, what do they imply concerning us. Now, we know from all the discussions that have been going on that La République is controlled by the French and other partners around the world in order to keep us, particularly the children of Ambazonia, including the Francophones actually, in subjugation in order to extract our resources. And so Philimon Yang being placed as Secretary General of the General Assembly of UN may give us a false hope that our plight will be examined and the problems that we've been experiencing all these years will be solved. And we need to examine this and reveal the truth of truly what's going on so that people don't come a year later and be disappointed that Philimon Yang did not provide anything positive, any good results that we can rejoice about. Now, before we go deeper into this, we need to know, first of all, what the UN is, and then also who Philimon Yang is. Let's start with what the UN is. Basically, the United Nations is a relic of the Second World War that was formed to maintain peace around the world, as they say. You know that there have been wars in European mainland, even in our African continent. Individual tribes have been having wars among themselves, but basically, internationally and documented, there have been wars in European mainland, in British Isles, as well as even between Britain and the continent of Europe. You can read about the 100 Years' War, the 30 Years' War, and the 7 Years' War, and between the British and the French, and also in the mainland of Europe between the French and others, including the Germans. But what actually happened is that in 1800, Britain, England united with Scotland and Northern Ireland to form the United Kingdom. And since then, Britain became extremely very powerful. And of course, the Industrial Revolution started, and they needed raw materials for these factories. And so they explored the world to capture the lands and get all the resources for the emerging industries that were coming up in Europe to provide basically what they needed, and also sell and control the resources of the earth. So that by 1913, Britain, remember the First World War started in 1914, by 1913, Britain was the most powerful nation on planet Earth. It controlled 25% of all the lands on Earth, all the way reaching to China, India, of course, Australia, New Zealand, some of the islands, and then coming through across the Arabic nations, Africa, right up through to Canada. As they used to say, the sun rises on the British Isles and sets on the British Isles. So Britain controlled 1/4 of all the territories on planet Earth, and it was the richest country on planet Earth, the most powerful. The United States was not yet known as any powerful nation. So anyway, so the First World War emerged in Europe, where the Germans and their partners were fighting against the British. The Russians came to assist, and basically the Germans were overcoming the British, having captured the French, and the Americans came in on the side of the British, and they succeeded to overcome the Germans. And that's where our plight started, in the sense that our territory had been taken by the Germans after the Conference of Berlin, and the Germans controlled it. And so basically all these territories were taken away by the victors of the First World War. So the British and the Americans and the Russians, they decided to take all German territories and divided it among the colonial powers, which was Britain particularly. So the German Cameroon was taken and divided, as you know. The people of the Southern Cameroons were under the control of the British, and you have the people of the French Cameroon controlled by the French. Anyway, so the British were weakened after the First World War, and they were supported by the United States. Unfortunately, a few less than 3 decades after the Second World War started, and again, Britain was weakened, and the United States came in on their side along with the Russians and crushed the Germans and their allies. And so that after this war, Britain became a very weak country. After that, the United States emerged as the most powerful nation on earth. So the United Nations was founded in San Francisco, put the capital in New York, and the so-called victors of this Second World War became the primary deciding bodies within the United Nations. So those are the United States, Britain, France was just co-opted in there, and Russia and the Chinese were taken. So these are the deciding entities within the United Nations. All the other nations were co-opted to claim that they were maintaining peace by bringing all the nations to be talking together. But the decisions that are made in the US in the UN are primarily by these 5 entities. And as time evolved, of course, you had the Cold War and so many things. It has come to the point where mainly the United States make decisions in the United Nations. And the officers of the UN, like the Secretary General of the UN, the President of the General Assembly of the UN, other officers, they usually come from other weaker, smaller nations. They are just occupying an office as servants. They do not make any decisions. The main decisions are done by the permanent members of the UN Security Council who have veto power. And of those, the United States is the strongest. And in there, of course, as I said, you have Britain and you also have France and then Russia and China. Usually when decisions are made, the US goes around and lobby, as they say. They try to talk out the Chinese and the Russians to abstain so that basically the will of the United States prevails. So as far as the UN is concerned, the will of the United States prevails. And if you watch carefully, you realize that there is a small nation on planet Earth who does not care what the United States decides and even defies the United States and the United Nations, and the US is compelled to support them. That is the state of Israel. We'll not go into that right now. So what I'm trying to say is that the UN Secretary General does not have any real power. The President of the UN General Assembly is just a symbolic position. That is the position that Philimon Yang is sitting in right now. He does not truly have any power to do anything. And there are other officers in there like this, secretary, press secretary, and all those people. They are usually from smaller countries. So coming back to who Philimon Yang is bona fide an Ambazonian in the sense that he was born in the former British Southern Cameroon. From the information I've gathered, his biologic father is Solomon Tandeng Muna. His mother is from Oku. And as a good father, Solomon Tandeng Muna helped him through school as his son, and he graduated from Enam and became a magistrate in Boya. And by 1979, Ahijo co-opted him into the government. He became a minister of mines and power and has remained in the government till date. And basically, he was in government since 1979, was sent to Canada as ambassador or commissioner for Cameroon. And he stayed there for over 20 years and became the dean of the ambassadors in Canada. Anyway, eventually he was brought back. He remained in the presidency as assistant secretary general of the presidency, eventually became the so-called prime minister. And he was prime minister when the Ambazonian conflict started. When this conflict started in 2016 with the teachers and lawyers that went out on the street, he was prime minister. We know his outings to Bamenda. And while he was doing his best to try and listen patiently, writing down the grievances of the teachers to see how he could solve the problems, certain utterances that he made in Bamenda on behalf of the government as prime minister were objected in Yaoundé. That means basically he was a weak prime minister. He doesn't have any voice. When he was trying to pretend to be working on behalf of the government and try to see whether he could listen to these teachers and lawyers to solve the problems, even the few things that he was trying to suggest, Yaoundé defied them. Anyway, he stayed there and then eventually was removed and went to the government and became a symbolic person carrying basically the symbols of the state. So when people are being elevated to high-ranking positions, by putting those medals on their chest, he will be the one carrying it, and Biya will take it and put it on their chest. So that is his position that he's been there. And now La République, in collaboration with the French, they lobbied and got him to become the so-called president of the UN General Assembly. And he is sitting there. He's not as powerful as people think. He doesn't have any voice. He's as weak as he was prime minister. And let us not be deceived to think that he will be able to deliver the goods. I just wanted to describe those two so we know exactly who the UN is, who makes decisions in the UN, and who is Philimon Yang, and what power does he truly have, so we don't have false hopes.
Okay, that's very clear. You can only get such insights and knowledge only on the horizon. If you haven't shared since you joined, please ensure to share as you join us, because this is a very important information. Like I always say, we need to have the knowledge and the awareness, so we fight our battles and the war with understanding. Thank you very much on that. Now, what is the significance? You've said we shouldn't have false hope, but on a greater side, Ambazonians have been fighting. The United Nations has been involved from the beginning of the people of Southern Cameroon becoming part of La Republique. Ahijo made statements, made promises to the United Nations at the time, and the UN had required certain conditions to be in place for us to become of La République du Cameroon. Now they have lobbied to put a so-called Ambazonian or someone from a Southern Cameroon, I say someone from Southern Cameroon descent, in this position. What does that mean, considering that one, the UN does not or the president of the United Nations does not have any real political or influence on any state or country, and the decision makers or the power brokers within the UN is not within the executive of the United Nations? What does that mean for Amazonian struggle?
Correct. So it's important for us to know exactly what truly happened at the time that we were acquiring our independence around October 1 of 1961. La République had already had its independence on January 1 of 1960. And the French imposed Ahijo on La République du Cameroun as their president. And our people, led by Foncher and Endele and others, were in good honesty negotiating for independence. Our people had requested that we should have our own nation, but the British and Cohen, in collaboration with the French, suppressed the option of independence and compelled us to either acquire independence by joining Nigeria that the British will control, or also by remaining with La République Cameroun that the French would control. And most of our people do not know the deception that happened. I will be reading here some 18 promises that Ahijo gave before we joined them to deceive us to think that we will be treated well. Now, the person who is sitting now called president, when Ahijo was making these statements, was but a student in Paris. Paul Biya was but a student. So his statements afterwards are led by the French. I want to read here to the knowledge of our people the promises of Amadou Ahijo in the United Nations before we joined them, what they promised to do. One of them, he says, the two territories, that means the British Southern Cameroon and the French Cameroon, will be united, but they will maintain their respective institutions. Now, we know that with time, they have dismantled our institutions. The Southern Cameroons will keep its own administration, its own parliament, and its own laws, which Ahijo said in 1961. He went further. We have promised and we solemnly reaffirm that the institutions of the Southern Cameroons will be respected. We will not annex the Southern Cameroons. The union between the two territories will be a federal one, with each territory maintaining its autonomy and institutions. We will respect the cultural and linguistic differences between the two territories. Remember that Biya said they attempted to annex and capture us and let us be literally submerged in the Francophone system, but it never succeeded. But here, Ahijo was saying, we will respect the cultural and linguistic differences between the two territories. The Southern Cameroons will maintain its own educational system, its own legal system, and its own administrative system. The Southern Cameroons will have its own government, its own parliament, and its own laws. We will not impose our institutions on the Southern Cameroons. We are not seeking to annex the Southern Cameroons. We want a union based on equality mutual respect, and mutual benefit. The union will be a voluntary one, and the Southern Cameroons will be free to withdraw from it if it so chooses. We will not use force or coercion to maintain the union. We will create a federal state where the two territories will be equal partners. The Southern Cameroons will have its own premier or prime minister, its own ministers, and its own civil service. The union will be based on the principles of democracy, liberty, and justice. We will respect the rights of all citizens regardless of their origin or language. That was on February 10th, 1961. We will promote economic development and social progress in both territories. We will work together to build a prosperous and happy future for all Cameroonians. This was Bia's Ahidjo's statement to the UN General Assembly in 1961. The Southern Cameroons will maintain its own judicial system, its own police force, and its own defense force. We will not impose our security forces on the Southern Cameroons. We will respect the cultural heritage of both territories. We will promote the development of both English and French languages in our country, delivered on February 10th, 1961. We will establish a federal government with a president, a prime minister, and a council of ministers. The Southern Cameroons will have its own representatives in the federal government. The union will be based on the principles of equality, justice, and mutual respect. We will work together to build a united and prosperous Cameroon. This February 10th, 1961. We will promote economic cooperation and development between the two territories. We will work together to build roads, bridges, and other infrastructures. This is to the UN General Assembly in 1961. The Southern Cameroons will maintain its own educational system with its own curriculum and its own certificates. We will recognize the certificates and diplomas of both territories. We will respect the traditional institutions and customs of both territories. We will work together to promote the cultural heritage of our country. February 10, 1961 to the UN General Assembly. The union will be a voluntary one, and either territory can withdraw from it if it so chooses. We will not use force or coercion to maintain the union. This was on February 10th, 1961 that Ahidjo said before we attempted to join them by October 1, 1961. And again, I want to emphasize the person we call President of Cameroon, Paul Biya, was but a student in Paris. So this was a promise by the sitting President of La République du Cameroun to the United Nations. Now, what happened, we've mentioned here in various programs, after the attempted union in Fumban, where the British with the United Nations were supposed to sit with us, with the French Republic and France to carve out the promises of Ahidjo. What happened was the British were not there, the United Nations was not there, only the French were with Ahidjo, and they cheated on our forefathers and came up with a semblance of a federated constitution, which was not approved by the parliament of the former British Cameroon. Ahidjo rushed it through his own parliament. Our own parliament never approved it. And so we were forced to attempt to be with them. And since 1966, they started dismantling the institutions. They dissolved our political parties, formed only one, the CNU, which Ahidjo had as Union Camerounaise, and now they call it the Cameroon National Union. And subsequently, by 1968, they had bought off Muna, ST Muna, to collaborate with them, and they removed Joa and imposed Muna, who was working with them. They cheat by bribery all the time, and imposed Muna on us that they could manipulate. I remember I said that Muna was the biologic father of Philimon Young. Anyway, and then by 1972, they pretended that the federation was too costly and that we would have a referendum to dissolve the attempted federation and have only one. And people could only vote yes or oui in French, which is yes. So there was no true option of being against. And if you didn't vote and the military found you on the streets, they would beat you up and lock you up. So this was a false referendum. And by 1975, After the Biya fellow had come back from France in 1962, he was opted at the age of 28. He was co-opted into government as, secretary, the director of the Ministry of Education, and from there he was eventually moved to the presidency as Secretary General by 1968. And by 1975, he was imposed as the prime minister, and they changed the laws. And by 1979, they changed the law that the prime minister will become president, and he became president in 1982. I want us to know these things were not just done by Ahidjo. He was chaperoned by the French ambassador in Yaoundé. The French ambassador is the true leader of Francophone government in Cameroon, and the same in Francophone Africa. So the French ambassador is above what you call the president. He is a chaperone. He guides him and tells him what to do. He's only a puppet. So anyway, when Ahidjo was not very easy to manipulate, they tricked him by deceiving him that he was sick, brought Biya in, and he has literally been doing everything that the French want. When they tell him to jump, he is not asking them, why do you want me to jump? He is asking them, how high do you want me to jump? So that by 1984, he literally unilaterally dissolved, not even having the courtesy of asking Parliament. He dissolved the so-called United Republic and just changed it back to La République du Cameroun, and that continued until today. He's never changed. So I want to read to us one of our founding fathers, the one who succeeded to carry us to join La République du Cameroun, that is John Gook Foncha, when he, in competition with Ndele, trying to convince our people either to join Nigeria or La République. Remember, this was an imposition from the British and the French, the so-called United Nations being used here. Foncha won, and so that's why they say we are with La République. Hear what Foncha said. In June of 1990, Foncha resigned from the CPDM that was founded in Bamenda. And you need to hear his grievances and compare these to the promises of Ahidjo. And this is what Foncha is saying. I have the honor to inform Your Excellency, in this case Paul Biya, who was but a student when Ahidjo made those promises, that after careful consideration and careful thought, I have decided to address to you my resignation from the Cameroon People's Democratic Party, and my reasons for resigning are as follows. People need to pay attention. The CPDM, which elected me as its first national vice president, is a party which forms the government of Cameroon and has been responsible for shaping government policies. As the national vice president of the party, I have found it impossible to use my exalted position to help in any way, shape, or influence the policies of the party and nation. Because, he goes to explain here, and it's the same thing. All Anglophones, all former British and Cameroonians that are put in government, those are just exalted positions. They don't have any power, like Foncha is saying here. Foncha was supposedly the vice president of the CPDM, and Biya was supposed to be the president. Naturally, the two will sit together and decide things before they propose it to the House. But Foncha is saying here that he has found it impossible to do anything to shape policies or make any proposals, and he gives the reasons. One, demands by me for an audience with the chairman, Biya, of the party to discuss issues have been systematically turned down. That means Foncha, being the first national vice president of the CPDM, has asked to meet Biya to discuss issues of the state. They were totally turned down. Number two, several memos or representations I have made in writing on several important national issues have been ignored. During my political career, which spans over 40 years, this statement was in 1990. That was 30 years after we acquired independence. And his career spanned over 40 years, right when we were still with Nigeria, even in Lagos, before we went to Enugu and then came back to Boya. He is saying, during my political career that spans over 40 years, I headed the group that campaigned for and got the people of the then Southern Cameroons to vote for unification, after which I went from village to village in the then East Cameroon at the risk of my life to calm terrorism, which existed at the time. We need to know that the French, in collaboration with Ahidjo, were killing the Bamilekes and the people in the Basaland who had been asking for true independence in East Cameroon. They were called the Maquisards, the UPC terrorists. So this is Foncha saying here how he went from village to village to calm these as we were trying to join them. I even housed some Cameroonians wanted in East Cameroon. I successfully had them reconcile with the Ahijo government. He succeeded to get them to go and reconcile. I missed being shot down on my way from Bafang on peacemaking mission. In one of those missions, Abendong, one of the ministers of Southern Cameroon, was killed when they were trying to kill Foncha. After unification, a lot of Cameroonians had confidence in me. And when the first presidential elections were coming up, many people urged me to stand against